So by way of introduction, I want to start off by talking about census interaction, just saying what they are and what they involve. Because the poll we had earlier showed that quite a few of you have never used census interaction data or flow data. Flow data are about data that involve counts of flows between two places, an origin and a destination, or perhaps a residence and a workplace. They're one of the last census data products that are released from censuses because counts have to be collated from the three national agencies: ONS for England and Wales, NRS for Scotland, and NISRA for Northern Ireland. The questions that are asked on the census form allow us to produce various matrices, or allow ONS, I should say, and the other agencies, to produce various matrices of data. First of all, there are a set of migration tables. These are based on the question on the census form which asked, what was your usual address 1 year ago? There was a tick box to that question which asked whether your former address 1 year ago was a student term time address or school address. That's allowed the generation of a special set of student tables for people who were full-time students a year ago. And that will allow us to learn more about the way that students move away from their places of study. We also have workplace tables. They're based on the question asking you in your main job, what is the address of your workplace? And finally, we have second residence tables, and these are new for 2011. And these are based on questions in the census form which asked, do you stay at another address for more than 30 days a year? And what is that address? Some of the tables are only available for England and Wales. Sometimes that's because the data for Scotland haven't been released yet. In the case of the second residence questions, it's because those questions were only asked in England and Wales. We can think about breaking the data up in various ways. So we've already seen different data sets. We can also look at different spatial levels. Local authorities, MSOAs, wards, OAs and workplace zones. The data are also divided into different groups based on their security level and who can access the data. Some data are open or public, some are safeguarded, and some are secure. Finally, we can think about dividing the data up on the basis of their attributes. Some of the tables are what we call flow or headcount tables. Those are just for total persons. Some are univariate observations. They break down the flow by a single variable. Finally, we have multivariate tables as well. They break down flows by more than one variable. I mentioned a moment ago, in the previous slide, different access levels. This is a new idea for 2011 data. And it recognizes that there's a trade-off between the amount of information that can be published in terms of the spatial scale and the level of attribute detail, whilst retaining confidentiality within the data. Public data, or open data, are disseminated via NOMIS and via WICID under the Open Government License, so anybody can use the data. They're also available from ONS on optical media. Safeguarded data are disseminated to registered users via WICID. Finally, the secure data some tables have been produced, others are in production, and they will be available via the VML, the Virtual Microdata Laboratory. So users will need to go to a secure location to use those data. And that's because they're the most spatially detailed and data with highest level attribute detail. So they contain a large number of very small counts. This table and the next couple of slides try to show how that trade-off works between the level of attribute detail and the access level. This shows the state for the headcount tables. So for local authority level observations, data will be available as the public data sets, the open data sets. For the SWS, the workplace data, there will also be MSOA to MSOA level data that's open. For the other three datasets, and in all cases, for the most spatially detailed observations, those data will be safeguarded. This shows a similar picture for univariate datasets. The least detailed, and those with sex and age attributes, will be available at local authority level in an open form. As we add attribute detail, or as we make them more spatially detailed, then those become available as safeguarded data. As we get to the most spatially detailed level, and some of the more sensitive variables, they move into the secure group of tables. Finally, this is the case for multivariate tables. And again, at local authority level, we'll see some multivariate tables that are available as open data. But most of them will be available either as safeguarded or as secure data. I now want to speak about the data that have been released so far and about forthcoming data. Two sets of data have been released so far. A group of open data tables that were released in July, and a group of safeguarded data tables that were released yesterday. I'll also say something about the next batch of safeguarded data tables, which we expect to be released very soon. In terms of open data, I want to look first at migration data and second residence data. For migration data, there are some flow counts, some flow tables showing counts of all migrants, including migrants from outside the UK who are entering the UK. We have multivariate observations of migrants by age and sex. For the second residence statistics, we've got four different tables. One showing flows from a second residence to a place of work. One showing flows from the usual residence to the place of work. One showing flows from where you live, which might be your usual residence, or might be a second residence that you have for the purposes of work, to your place of work. And finally, a table of flows showing usual residence to second address for dependent children. We also have some univariate observations of the second residence data by age and by sex. I've got a diagram here that tries to explain the relationships for the second residence data, because they're a little complex. Some of the tables show the journey from the movement from your home to your second residence for those people who indicated that they had a second residence. Others show the flow from the second residence to the place of work. Some tables show the flow from the home place to the workplace. And finally, some tables aggregate both of those observations. They have some flows from home places and some from second residences. And that's trying to show the overall picture of commuting. If we go on to consider the open data, we have student migration statistics by age and sex for people who moved from a student term time address in the year before the census. And we have some univariate journey to work observations by sex, by age, and by mode of transport. Yesterday, some new safeguarded data were released. These are available to download as a bulk file via WICID, and we can also offer download files for SASPAC users. SASPAC is used by many, but not all, local government users. We'll have queryable versions of those data available through WICID soon. The release yesterday was of migration data, and we had some flow data tables, some headcount tables, showing OA level migration data for moves within the UK, or rather within England and Wales and Northern Ireland, and from outside the UK. There's also a multivariate set of data showing movements at ward level by age and sex. The next release which as I said, we think will be very soon. ONS haven't publicised the date yet, so we don't want to mention a date until they do. Again, they'll be downloadable as bulk files from WICID, and there'll also be files for SASPAC users. That will include migration data, some more OA level data, and some more ward level age by sex data. And it will also include some new workplace data. Some OA to workplace zone level data, and UK level observations of journeys by sex, by age, and by transport mode. The workplace zones I mentioned there are again another new feature for 2011. In the past, we've had to look at flows into areas based on the residential geography of the country. Workplace zones are based on the workplace geography of the country. And this is particularly useful in places like the City of London, which have very large numbers of workers going into them, that we can split those up into more than one zone. I've got an example now of some work we can do using one of those tables. And I've used table MMO1, which is a multivariate table, but I'm only using the count of total migrants within that. So within WICID, I can look at the WICID downloads link, which is highlighted there. When I click on that, I'm given a login page. The safeguarded data have to be used by registered users, so I need to select the bottom of those two links, the registered access for academic and most other users. With a few confirmation screens, I get through to this list of downloads. If you haven't registered, then you'll be prompted to do so, and you'll need to do that before you can see these data. These links show different sets of data, and the one I'm interested in is the safeguarded data release batch one, the tables that were released yesterday. There's a list of them here. For each table, there's a description of what's in the data and the geographies involved. So I'm interested in this example in table MMO1, which is highlighted here. On the right, I've highlighted the download link. There's one aspect to that which is worth noting. That table shows trips from people outside the UK. It includes data for people outside the UK. I've actually just realised I should have highlighted the row below. For people outside the UK, into the UK. There are two geographic identifiers, a ward label and a country label. The country label is not so obvious to spot, but we have information on that within WICID. If you click the available data link that was highlighted on the left, you get this screen showing you what can be all the data we know about and all the geographies and so on that we know about in WICID. If you click the supported geographies link, you get a list of all the geographies that we can use. And one of those is 2011 SMS foreign origins, a list of all the countries in that table. That pops up an information window, and in that window is a link to generate a list of all tables, of all labels. Sorry. So I did that to get a list of the country codes within that table that I downloaded. Now, using that data that I've just downloaded, we can look at flows at ward level from origins outside the UK. And what I was interested in looking at was what I've called the modal origin. And it's the origin from which most migrants arrived. And I'm only looking here at migrants from outside the UK. I'm not looking at migrants from inside the UK who are likely to be much larger in number. And I calculated that for each destination. And I did that by downloading the data from WICID and then reloading it into an SQL database on my PC. And I re-aggregated that within SQL on the basis of origin and flow size. I then grouped by the origin country. And that allowed me to find out how many wards had a given country as the most common country of origin, the modal origin. I then looked for the countries that had the highest number of wards. for which that country was the modal origin. I'm going to look at the results of that in a moment. First of all, we've got another poll, and we'd like you to see if you know what the answer is. Again, the poll only offers 5 options, and we've got 10 on the screen because we're getting carried away a bit. So one of these countries is the country that's most frequently seen to be the most common origin country for wards in England and Wales. So I can see you're voting now for what that might be. Okay, I think the results are still in progress, so we'll let that go on for a little while. Okay, I think we're standing nice. Okay, we've got most of the votes in, I think. So our audience poll was that 44% for India was the most frequently observed modal origin. The next highest was 26% for Australia, then 19% for China, then 7% for the USA. So lo and behold, our next slide tells us what the answer was. And the answer is Australia. There are 897 wards in England and Wales, out of about 8,500, for which the most common origin outside the UK was Australia. The next highest is Spain, then the USA, then Poland. And I've got some maps of the first 3 of those. And all I've done here is highlighted the wards in England, in this case, for which Australia was the most common origin for migrants from outside the UK. This is the picture for Spain, which was the second highest, and finally the USA. And for the USA, we begin to see a bit of a pattern in East Anglia and Cambridgeshire around places such as RAF, Lakenheath. We can also look at aggregate statistics for UK migration. And I'm not going to go into those today, but it's important to note that they exist. That there are or will be counts of inflows and outflows and overall net migration by each area, disaggregated by various observations, such as age and ethnic group and so on. And those go down to MSOA level and to ward level, and also in some cases to OA level, but with less detail. Those are available through Infuse and other services. Infuse is provided as part of the UK Data Service Census support. So how do we get to these data? I showed an example of using WICID to download some data before. If you want to use that, the first places to go is to this site, ukdataservice.ac.uk. At the bottom right, you can see a list of links, one of which is Census support. If we click on that, then that opens up the Census support website, which is a sub-part of the UK Data Service. That has its own URL, census.ukdataservice.ac.uk. Now, that bottom right-hand part of the screen shows some more detailed links. So these are different services provided as part of Census support. We're interested in the flow data service. So clicking on that flow data link takes us to this. And we have our own URL, WICID, WICID, which stands for Web Interface to Census Interaction Data, wikid.ukdataservice.ac.uk. So this is our homepage. And this offers the ability to get to data through a number of means. We have a flexible query builder, which can be used with the open data and with a large number of older data sets. And we have a downloads link as well. The downloads link takes us to a list of tables, as we've seen before. The flexible query builder allows us to build up a query through various screens. And I've got an example of that in the next couple of pages. So here, the user is selecting some data. There are various ways of selecting data. If you know the structure of data sets and different tables, then you can search by that to find a particular table, such as this one. If not, you can search by variable type. So for example, you can click age in an index and get a list of all tables that mention age. In this table, this is the table framework. So these numbers listed here on the right-hand side that are highlighted are cell numbers. They're not data observations, they're cell numbers. So the user can select one or more of those. Having done so, and having selected some origins and destinations, they can then produce output. And that can be produced in a number of ways. It can be produced as a matrix, as shown here, between origins and destinations. The same data can be produced as a pairwise list of observations, which is the form that's most useful for putting into SPS or SPSS or Stata or SAS. And it can also be produced as a form matching the original table framework. And these are the table frameworks that were circulated to users. And that brings us to the end of our brief tour around the data. And so some conclusions from that before we go on to questions. The origin and destination data have continued to evolve from previous censuses. We've got more data sets than we've ever had before, more different types of data. Also, they're not adjusted as they had been in 2001 using a mechanism known as small cell adjustment methodology. The flip side of that, the flip side of not using small cell adjustment methodology, which had an effect of perturbing the data quite significantly, the other side of that is that we need to have this new superiority classification. That data are split up into public, safeguarded, and secure data. So that will mean detailed tables can be available for small areas in some cases, but only in a secure setting. More tables of safeguarded and secure data will be released by the end of this year. As I said earlier, the safeguarded data are available for registered users, and that's not just limited to academic users. Non-academic users can also go to the UK Data Service website and apply for a username. We've got a couple of links here to the pages in the ONS data prospectus that show the origin and destination tables, and a link to where to go to log in to WICID. And that's a link to a particular part of the site. If you just go to wicid.ukdataservice.ac.uk, that will work for you as well. We'd like to thank the ESRC who support us, the University of Essex, the University of Leeds, the University of Manchester, the University of Edinburgh, and UCL, where Vasilis and I are based. Our contact details are now on the screen. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to take them now in the webinar. But if you have further questions that you want to email to us, we'd be happy to answer them as well.